marked day 173 of the Trump administration, and today came a big change. A string of emails showing a Trump campaign willing to let the Russian government help win them the election. After 3 days of headlines and under threat of reading them first in the New York Times, Donald Trump Jr., the president's eldest son, released a chain of emails from and to his British contact, Rob Goldstone, saying a Russian official could provide official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and would be very useful to your father. The high-level and sensitive information is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. In his initial reply, Don Jr. says, "If it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer." A short time ago, Donald Trump Jr. was on Fox News with Sean Hannity.
Someone sent me an email. I can't help what someone sends me. You know, I read it, I responded accordingly, and if there was something interesting there, I think it's pretty common. In the end, there was probably some bait and switch about what it was really supposed to be about, and so, you know, there is nothing there.
Did you tell your father anything about this?
No. It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
You heard the president's son there say there was nothing there. It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. The president's son has, over the last 4 days, offered shifting explanations for all of this. And today, with the email thread released, a statement from Don Jr. that reads in part, "The information they suggested they had about Hillary Clinton, I thought, was political opposition research. As we have said, she had no information to provide and wanted to talk about adoption policy." Also note, with Don Jr.'s multiple statements so far, his claim that he asked Jared and Paul, that would be Manafort, to attend, but told them nothing of the substance. The problem with that is the email chain released today shows he forwarded the entire exchange to both Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner. The email subject line, quote, "Russia, Clinton, private and confidential." Critics of this White House say this is now clear evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin, something President Trump has denied repeatedly for months.
There is no collusion, and everybody has said, and I think you will admit that, there is no collusion between me and my campaign and the Russians. They're all saying there is no collusion. There is no collusion.
Precisely.
Well, I'd like it to move fast, if possible, but I'll tell you what I really want. There is no collusion. We had nothing to do with Russia and everything else. There is no collusion between certainly myself and my campaign, but I can always speak for myself and the Russians. Zero. Believe me, there's no collusion. There was no collusion. And everybody, even my enemies, have said there is no collusion. No collusion. No obstruction, no collusion, no obstruction. There has been no collusion. There has been leaking by Comey, but there's been no collusion, no obstruction, and virtually everybody agrees to that.
And for the record, and this is important, right now this is all happening in darkness. More often than not lately, and again today, we're not able to see the White House briefing. Coupled with a president with no public schedule for 3 days, and this is dark by any modern standard. Through Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the president said this today: "My son is a high-quality person, and I applaud his transparency." Now that the president can no longer claim that Russian collusion is a ruse or a sham or a witch hunt or fake news, there's no way to know where we are headed. As for our starting panel tonight, let's bring them in. A mini White House press corps, Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. His latest piece, sharing a byline with Maggie Haberman tonight, carries the headline, "Rancor at White House as Russia Story Refuses to Let the Page Turn." Ashley Parker, White House reporter for the Washington Post, her latest with Philip Rucker, Category 5 hurricane. White House under siege by Trump Jr.'s Russia revelations. And Vivian Salama, White House reporter for the Associated Press. She is looking ahead tonight. Her headline is about the president's next overseas trip, which we should remember begins tomorrow. Trump storms Paris for Bastille Day. Welcome to all of you. Peter Baker, this was a story your paper broke, so I'll ask you first, how big a story was this today in the whole scope of the Russia collusion story we've been covering?
Well, I think it is a big story because, in fact, it does sort of undercut the defense that there was no collusion. Not only, at a very minimum, we learned from these emails that there was a willingness, if not even an eagerness on the part of the president's son to receive information that he was told anyway would be incriminating and directly from what was described as a Russian government lawyer on behalf of the Russian government that was supporting his father. One of the things that's really interesting about these emails as you read them is that they leave very little ambiguity. There's not a lot of room for misconstruing of the meaning here. The lawyer who was coming to meet him was described as a Russian government lawyer. Now, she didn't technically work for the government, but she was described that way to him. That was what he understood. It was said very clearly in the email that it was to incriminate Hillary. That was the phrase, that it was the Russian government supporting his father. And Donald Trump Jr. very clearly says, I love it. So there's not a lot of room for argument, as there often is with, emails that become public from a politician kind of situation. So that's what's really fascinating about this.
And now, Peter, I want to ask both you and Ashley about the atmospherics you report on tonight. You describe a traveling White House in some disarray as they're coming back from the G20, trying to draft a statement to explain away these emails. The statement, of course, goes awry in the public domain and gets changed right up till today. You also describe among staff members a circular firing squad.
Yeah, I know it's very interesting. If you ask people in the White House and around the White House who are part of this team to describe the events of the last few days, first of all, you get different versions depending on who you talk to. Either, for instance, Donald Trump Jr. is described as being agitating to give a more fulsome explanation from the beginning, or the exact opposite, depending on who you talk to. You hear people saying, really, this is Jared's fault, Jared Kushner's fault, or really, Mark Kasowitz is out with the president, or all of these people inside now are, turning their guns on each other because it's a very damaging story and it's a very tense time. They feel under siege. They feel like they can't seem to escape the story no matter how much they try. Even the meeting with Vladimir Putin didn't put an end to it. It only seemed to continue encouraging discussion of it.
And Ashley, then there is the gripping account you and Mr. Rucker write about the West Wing tonight. Give our viewers the benefit of your reporting what you're hearing about the machinations inside.
Sure. A lot of it is what Peter just said, which is that this is a White House that even in the best of times, sort of mistrust and suspicion is a core cultural value. And so now there is a ton of finger pointing. And one of the key things you hear senior White House officials talking about is not, how to deal with this crisis as much as, who leaked what to who and who's to blame. So that's something they're trying to get to the bottom of internally. And there's also just a tremendous amount of frustration. They did feel, perhaps correctly, that the president had a good trip abroad, that he could come back, sort of ride the wave of that. They also wanted to be focused on health care and some other issues that they think are good for him politically, good for the base, like trade. And they are just deeply frustrated and exasperated that Russia, again, is this issue and this black cloud that keeps on intruding and has overshadowed everything in this West Wing just one more time.
Well, Ashley, a follow-up, and I don't know if it's answerable exactly, but do you have any sense that the president's sadness is over the story in chief and the fact that the meeting has happened, the fact that it shuts down a line of argument and defense, and the fact that it implicates his eldest son? Or is the president's problem with it the negative story that the story in chief makes?
Well, I think, to be clear, from what we've heard is he's not frustrated with his namesake son. He is more sort of angry about the fact of the story, the fact that it adds some real credibility to this stuff that, as you just played, he's dismissed time and time again, and also that it overshadows his agenda. And it was described to us as something, as he views, as just the next chapter in this ongoing Russia saga, and the next chapter now entraps or involves a member of his family.
Vivian, we're going to talk about this during a later segment on tonight's broadcast with an advisor to Trump. But There's Mike Pence today, the vice president, for the first time in my memory at least, put out a statement. The takeaway of which, condensed into English, is, I just want to remind you all, there was a time I didn't have anything to do with anyone named Trump. And Vivian, it's startling to see.
Absolutely is. And at the off-camera briefing that we had later on, the White House briefing, Sarah Huckabee Sanders actually went out of her way to assure reporters that actually the relationship between the vice president and the president is solid, that they remain very close, and they aren't trying to create a distance, or at least Mike Pence is not trying to create a distance from the president. So this is definitely something that's lingering. They're trying to cover it up in any way that they possibly can. But it's obvious that there is this sense emerging that Mike Pence now, Vice President Mike Pence wants to protect himself. Whether or not there's something to protect himself from, it's making people nervous who are working in this administration. And, to kind of talk about something that Ashley was saying just now, is that, one of President Trump's frustrations is that people in his administration haven't been able to kind of come to his rescue. And you see this coming up a lot, where it's not only the fact that, he wants to kind of carry out his agenda, but he wants his administration, especially his inner circle, to make this go away so that he can focus on that and kind of get in the good graces of, the American people and kind of carry on with that. And it just doesn't seem to be happening. And so a lot of his frustration not only is directed at the media, but directed at his inner circle that can't seem to protect him from this and get this narrative moving forward.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.